Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. New York, Friday night. The city glowed like a giant painting, brushed with neon lights, thin rain, and music spilling from every bar. At the corner of 8th Avenue and West 47th Street, the sign for Club Velvet cast a hazy purple glow over the wet sidewalk. Streams of young people moved in and out like small waves, perfume, alcohol, and the heat rising from asphalt blending into that chaotic scent of youth and mistakes. Madison Hayes stood at the curb, clutching her silver clutch tightly, watching the crowd as if she were watching a movie she wasn't sure she wanted to star in. The champagne-colored satin dress hugged her toned figure, bare shoulders gleaming under the violet light. A silver necklace trembled with every anxious breath. Her dark blonde hair fell in soft curls, a few strands damp from the humidity. And across her chest, the white sash that read, "Bride to be sparkled," a reminder she couldn't escape. "Jessica, I'm serious. Can we just go home?" she pleaded, turning to her best friend. Jessica Moore, with her fiery red hair, wine-red lipstick, and a skin-tight mini dress that screamed rebellion, grinned mischievously. "No way. You've been working yourself to death for 3 months planning this wedding. Tonight, you relax. This is your last night as Madison Hayes, single woman. And possibly the last night I'll ever be respected," Madison muttered. Jessica burst out laughing, grabbing her friend's arm. "Come on, Miss Excel spreadsheet for the honeymoon. There's no chart to save you tonight." Madison was dragged into Club Velvet, pulled into another universe, one where logic, responsibility, and Manhattan seriousness melted into the fumes of alcohol. The air was thick, the bass heavy enough to make the floor vibrate. Blue-purple lights danced across the ceiling, bouncing off glowing cocktails and high-pitched laughter. "This is the purple version of hell," Madison whispered, blinking to adjust to the dark. "This," Jessica corrected, raising her margarita, "is heaven for brides who want to live before dying in a wedding dress." Reluctantly, Madison sank into a VIP booth. In front of her stood a champagne tower, surrounded by her squealing friends. Someone placed a plastic flower crown on her head. Someone else blasted Beyoncé's "Single Ladies," and the whole table screamed. Madison laughed and wanted to disappear at the same time. Ethan Brooks, her fiancé, flashed in her mind like a bright frame. That soft smile, the camera always hanging around his neck. His voice teasing, "Don't do anything that'll make me have to rescue you from the evening news, Mads." Ethan, her desk partner since 6th grade, the boy who once hid her failed math test under his folder, the laziest photographer in Brooklyn, as she used to call him. Their love was built on silly laughter, shared photos, and pizza nights, rather than fancy anniversaries. And now, watching the wild crowd, Madison wondered, did she really need a night like this? The music suddenly dimmed. Jessica jumped up, voice ringing like an MC's. "Okay, ladies, time for the main event." The table erupted. Madison shook her head, equal parts dread and curiosity. "Jessica Moore, don't tell me." "Oh yes," Jessica said with a victorious grin. "I booked the hottest guy from the agency. Just for our bride." "No, absolutely not, Jessica." But the music surged. From the side door near the stage, a man walked in. The spotlight swept across him, and Madison's breath caught. He didn't look like the other performers. No leather jacket, no cop hat, no LED collar. Just a perfectly tailored black suit, a crisp white shirt, and a gray tie loosened slightly. His stride was slow, confident. The light skimmed over his sharp jawline, tousled dark hair, and light gray eyes. Cool, steady, but carrying an awkward flicker of embarrassment. Madison thought, he doesn't look like he belongs here. Jessica shrieked, "Oh my God, classy! You owe me for life." The man approached their table, scanning the crowd before his gaze settled on her. "Madison Hayes." His voice was deep, warm, steady, none of the performative cheer of an entertainer. Madison froze. Me?" He gave a small nod, loosening his tie. Her friends screamed. "Oh God, this is actually happening," she whispered, her face burning. The man leaned in, resting both hands on the back of her chair, his voice low, just for her. Sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I'm not a stripper. Madison's eyes widened. You what? I was looking for Velvet Bistro next door. Looks like I walked into the wrong place. He exhaled, grimacing lightly, then straightened up. I should leave before someone throws money at me. Madison glanced around, just as Jessica pulled out a $20 bill, laughing hysterically. She couldn't help it. Madison burst out laughing, real and loud enough to drown the bass. He turned, catching that laugh. For the first time, his lips curved into a small, helpless smile. Half amusement, half surrender, melting the chill that had first surrounded him. Madison raised her hand slightly. Just pretend you're performing. If you walk out now, they'll know something's off. He tilted his head, murmuring, You're asking me to fake strip? For both our survival, yes, he sighed. Fine. But if I ruin the floor, that's on you. Turning toward the crowd, he undid another button, tapping along with the beat. No choreography, no seduction, just a polite man trying to perform with painfully honest awkwardness. When he nearly tripped, Madison laughed so hard she doubled over. Her friends cheered wildly, convinced it was part of the act. After a few minutes, he bowed and left amid a chaotic round of applause. Madison was laughing so hard her mascara ran. As he passed her, she heard him murmur, I'm definitely going to be haunted by that laugh. Outside, drizzle fell steadily. Raindrops glimmered on the glowing pavement, splitting into thousands of shards of light. Madison gathered her dress and purse and stepped out. The man stood under the awning, untying his tie, smiling slightly when he saw her. You're really not a stripper? She teased, half believing, half not. Promise. I'm Daniel Sterling. The name made her frown slightly. It sounded familiar, though she couldn't place it. Are you in the entertainment business? Not quite. Tech. And you don't usually laugh at strangers, do you? Madison snorted. Only when the stranger almost trips during my bachelorette party. They both laughed. The steady rain cooled the city's heat. Car horns, the smell of pizza from the next shop, the violet glow spilling out of the club. All of it formed a strange harmony, chaotic yet calm. Daniel looked up at the sky, his tone low, thoughtful. Honestly, I was just wondering how many wrong turns it takes to end up in exactly the right place. Madison went quiet. For some reason, that line made her heart beat slow. She replied, half joking, half honest, maybe sometimes getting lost is the only way to find what's right. Daniel turned toward her. Their eyes met through the curtain of rain. Both smiled wordlessly. New York still blazed bright, but in that moment, the city seemed to shrink, leaving only two strangers who had found each other through chaos, mistake, and a real laugh. And that was the night Madison Hayes, the flawless bride whose life fit neatly into Excel cells, took her first step outside the grid. 2 days after the chaotic night at Club Velvet, Madison Hayes stood before the towering glass structure of Sterling Enterprises, looking up at its shimmering facade that mirrored the pale gray New York sky. Each floor glowed like a separate layer of clouds, cold, imposing, and distant. She swallowed hard, her palms sweating around the thin folder of documents in her hands. 2 nights had passed, but the image of the man out of place in the black suit still lingered in her mind. Those pale gray eyes, the awkward smile, and that warm, deep voice. I think I came in through the wrong door. A stranger in the middle of chaos, a fleeting encounter she was sure she'd never experience again. Little did she know that today she was walking straight into his world. The main lobby of Sterling Enterprises was a symphony of steel, glass, and absolute order. Madison's heels clicked softly against the marble floor. A massive LED wall displayed streams of tech news, and the silver S logo gleamed like a blade hanging in midair. The receptionist gave a polished smile. Miss Hayes, please proceed to the 52nd floor. The interview room is ready. The elevator shot upward, so fast she felt her back press against the wall. 52 floors, 30 seconds, 1 breath. When the doors opened, the cool air carried the scent of oak wood and black coffee. She inhaled deeply, adjusted her blazer, and reminded herself, it's just an interview, a job. Nothing to be afraid of. The assistant by the door, a graceful woman with silver hair, offered a kind smile. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Go right in. The office door opened. Sunlight flooded the room. Glass walls revealed a sweeping view of Manhattan, where sky and the Hudson River blended into one gleaming sheet of steel. A walnut desk sat at the center, immaculate, not a single paper out of place. And there he was. Daniel Sterling looked up from his laptop, his gaze faltering for a split second, as if someone had just mentioned a secret he was trying to forget. Madison froze. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other, seconds that felt like a lifetime. There was no mistake. The black suit, the tall frame, the slightly tousled hair, those gray eyes shadowed with faint exhaustion. But this time, he wasn't the man out of place. He was the man who owned the room. "Miss Hayes!" His voice was still deep, but more cautious now. Madison swallowed hard, resisting the urge to glance at the door for an escape. "Yes, I'm here for the executive assistant position." Daniel cleared his throat, then smiled. The kind of smile that was both genuine and self-mocking. "Please have a seat." She sat on the soft leather chair, spine straight, while her mind screamed, "Oh God, I laughed at the CEO. I made the CEO pretend to be a stripper." He skimmed through her resume, voice even and calm, though his eyes seemed careful not to linger on her face for too long. "Good education. 3 years of administrative experience. Why do you want to change jobs?" Madison steadied her tone. "I'd like to challenge myself in a more dynamic environment." He nodded slightly. Sterling Enterprises certainly fits that description. The corner of his mouth curved, his gaze sharpening. "Can you handle pressure?" A standard interview question, but to Madison it sounded like a subtle reminder. A mischievous smile tugged at her lips before she could stop it. "If I survived a miscast strip performance, I think I can handle the pressure here." The air froze for half a second. Then Daniel laughed. A real laugh. Clear, resonant, and utterly unexpected, even to himself. It was strange. The sound wasn't the polite, restrained laugh of a businessman, but something that escaped when a person forgot their role. He leaned on the desk, head slightly tilted, his voice low but teasing. "So, you remember. Hard to forget, sir." "Fair enough. I've never been interviewed in a setting like that either." They both laughed, softly, awkwardly, but genuinely. A piece of the invisible wall between them cracked. Daniel glanced down at the folder once more, then closed it. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Ms. Hayes, this position requires someone who can organize, stay calm, and have a sense of humor to survive the days without fixed hours." She pressed her lips together. "I've got the humor. As for the hours, we can negotiate." He raised an eyebrow. "You realize I usually stay in the office until 11 p.m., right? Lucky for you, I tend to stay up till 1 a.m., checking emails. We might get along." He laughed again. This time his eyes didn't avoid hers. Something in the air warmed, as if the chill in the glass room had been replaced by her boldness. Madison could feel her heartbeat quicken, not out of fear, but because she realized she was enjoying this. Not his power, but the moment itself. It made her feel alive. Daniel rested one hand on the desk, leaning forward slightly. "I have one rule when hiring. I don't care about a flawless resume. I care about how people react to the unexpected." "What about running into the wrong bride at a nightclub?" she asked lightly, her tone playful. "That would qualify as a special case study, and you passed brilliantly." They laughed again, no longer awkward, but natural, knowing. When Madison left the office, she had to take a deep breath just to make sure she hadn't dreamed the whole thing. The elevator glided down, her reflection in the mirror showing flushed cheeks and eyes that were oddly bright. She couldn't tell if she had just attended an interview or a charming duel of wits. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "How was the interview, future bride?" Madison looked at the screen and smiled faintly. "Fine. Just unusual." Up on the 52nd floor, Daniel Sterling stood by the window, his hand still resting on the folder labeled Madison Hayes. A faint smile curved his lips. Unusual indeed, but worth beginning. And so, On an ordinary morning in the city that never sleeps, fate quietly rewrote itself. Through a mistake, a laugh, and a glance neither of them would forget. Monday morning. New York was cold, gray, and sharp, like a shot of black espresso. Madison Hayes stepped into Sterling Enterprises with a brand new ID badge, showing a smile that was just a little too bright. She didn't know that smile would become a rare sight in the week ahead. The 52nd floor office was wide, bright, and silent. The glass walls threw a bluish-gray light onto pale wooden floors. Along the hallway, employees walked fast, spoke softly, and typed nonstop, as if breathing too loudly was forbidden within Daniel Sterling's domain. On Madison's desk sat 3 computer monitors, a still warm coffee cup, and her first email of the day. 9:03 a.m., reschedule board meeting, adjust agenda, confirm attendance. She sighed. 9:03. Good morning, pressure. 2 hours later, the coffee was cold and her salad box was still sealed. She'd been racing from one meeting to another, taking notes, firing off emails, replying to messages, updating calendars across 3 platforms. Every time she thought she was done, another notification popped up. Ms. Hayes, Daniel's voice came from behind her, low and steady. Madison spun around, phone still in hand, almost springing to attention. Yes, sir. He stood leaning against her desk, coffee in hand, expression unreadable. I asked for the 10 o'clock meeting summary. The file I received was blank. She glanced at her screen. Right, it's blank, but full of potential. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. I haven't entered the content yet, but the ideas are sprinting through my head as we speak. Daniel exhaled, half exasperated, half amused. Do you make a habit of stressing your superiors out with misplaced confidence? Only when they look too serious, Madison said, lips curling faintly. He paused, then shook his head and walked away. But just before he turned, the corner of his mouth lifted, an almost invisible crack in the armor of the ICE CEO. By noon, Madison sat cross-legged on her chair, typing an email while chewing a cold chicken sandwich. Outside the glass wall, rain misted the skyline. Her phone buzzed. Ethan was calling on FaceTime. His face filled the screen. Messy hair, suntanned skin, a wrinkled t-shirt, and the clutter of tripods and backdrops behind him. My future bride looks like she just finished boot camp, he teased. Madison laughed, leaning back in her chair. Close enough. We only skipped the part where I crawl across the floor. Ethan lifted his camera, putting on a mock-serious face. Having lunch with my camera. It doesn't talk as much as your CEO, she giggled. Are you jealous? Me? Number. Just saying, this camera looks at you all day without demanding meetings. His tone was light, joking, but his eyes softened. Quiet, waited. That silence between them wasn't usual. So, the new job's fun? He asked. Madison hesitated. Fun in a stressful but exciting kind of way. I'm learning a lot. Ethan nodded, forcing a smile. Good. Just don't forget to eat lunch. You're one to talk. They both laughed, but it wasn't the carefree laughter they used to share. After the call ended, Madison stared at her reflection on the black screen. There were faint shadows under her eyes. Ethan still made her smile, but there was a new kind of quiet settling between them, soft, uneasy, unfamiliar. That afternoon, the marketing meeting was tense. Daniel stood at the head of the table, straight-backed, gaze slicing through each slide. No assumptions, no emotion. I want numbers, not slogans, he said flatly. Madison sat at the far end, typing notes fast. He didn't say much, but each word landed like a blade. No one dared interrupt. Then the screen flickered. Connection lost. Madison muttered under her breath. Maybe even the projector needs a lunch break, sir. A beat of silence. Then a few cautious chuckles rippled through the room. Daniel glanced at her, not angry, not stern, just calm. Then please help it regain its motivation. When she fixed the issue, he passed by her desk, leaning down to murmur. Thank you, Miss Hayes, and next time don't make the projector laugh. She nearly laughed herself. Yes, sir. I'll punish it with endless spreadsheets. He closed his eyes briefly, as if fighting a smile. By the end of the day, the office was nearly empty. Madison was still there, perfecting her report. The pale gold of sunset poured in, turning her hair into strands of honey. Daniel stood by the doorway, hesitated, then said quietly, "You don't have to stay this late." She looked up. "I just want to make sure this email isn't full of potential anymore." He chuckled, an actual, genuine laugh, rare and warm. "Careful, Ms. Hayes. You're making this office a little too breathable." Madison blinked, half flustered. "Maybe that's part of my contract, sir." He nodded slightly and left. The door closed behind him, the sound of the elevator fading, while her heartbeat refused to settle. Her first day at Sterling Enterprises was over, and Madison Hayes realized she hadn't just entered a company. She'd stepped into a whole new world. Somewhere between deadlines, keyboard clicks, and cooling coffee, something was shifting, an undercurrent of curiosity, pull, and an invisible thread she wasn't ready to name yet. An autumn afternoon bathed New York in a warm golden light, reflected on the glass facade of the Chelsea Art Gallery, where a photography exhibition sponsored by Sterling Enterprises was taking place. The space was vast, white walls, a champagne scent, and soft jazz flowing through the air like a quiet luxury. Madison arrived 10 minutes late, beige coat draped over her arm, brown hair loosely tied at the nape of her neck. She was there on behalf of Daniel, since CEO Sterling didn't like crowds and had excused himself for a meeting with the finance board. She had no idea that tonight would mark the arrival of a small storm named Clara Sterling. Clara, 26, was the head of PR, a woman both admired and feared throughout the company. She moved through the crowd like a streak of color, pale blonde hair tied high, a brick-red jumpsuit hugging her slender frame, high heels clicking confidently against the wooden floor. Her mouth moved faster than the jazz, and her eyes sparkled as if she could see 3 undone tasks at once. "Madison Hayes," Clara called out, her voice ringing like a bell. "I heard you actually made my cousin laugh during an interview." "Good Lord, that's as rare as a solar eclipse." Madison chuckled. "He was probably just surprised." "Oh no," Clara shrugged. "Daniel only laughs when someone throws him off balance." "I like you already." Madison barely had time to respond. "Nice to meet you," before Clara was swept away, talking rapidly into her phone about a press release headline that needs to sound more magnetic. Halfway through the exhibition, Ethan appeared, not in his usual stiff blazer, but in a chambray shirt and dark jeans, a camera slung over his shoulder. He was covering the event for an art magazine. The gallery lights caught his sharp features, giving him that mix of rugged and tired charm. Madison spotted him instantly. Her heart eased. Amid all this polished sophistication, he was the most real thing in the room. "You actually fit right in with fancy places like this," Ethan teased, handing her a glass of champagne. "And I fit right in taking pictures of people who fit right in." "Just shoot from the right angle," Madison smiled, "and maybe I won't look so nervous." "You're nervous." "I'm standing in a room full of New York's upper class, and the CEO's cousin just talked faster than Monday morning's email chain." They both laughed. As if summoned by her own name, Clara reappeared. She glanced between them, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. "Oh," Clara drew the word out, her tone a mix of surprise and delight. "So this is the legendary fiancé I've heard about?" Madison was about to introduce them politely, but Clara had already extended a manicured hand. "Clara Sterling, PR at Sterling Enterprises. Lovely to meet the man who's captured all of Madison's attention and made her check her phone every 30 minutes. Ethan shook her hand with a tilted, polite smile. "Ethan Brooks, freelance photographer, the man who's captured all of Madison's coffee bills." Clara arched a brow. "Freelance? I thought Madison preferred men with full-time jobs." The air froze for a beat. Madison's eyes widened. "Clara!" But Ethan didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, smiling with a dry, ironic charm. "I'm full-time in love with Madison. The emotional pay is decent. Benefits are still under negotiation." A few guests nearby chuckled. Clara blinked, then let out a challenging, "My PR instincts say you're good with words. But real life isn't an ad campaign, Mr. Brooks." "Relax," Ethan replied lightly. "I shoot real photos. No filters." The retort made Clara pause, studying him like she was trying to spot a flaw in the frame, while Madison could only hide her face behind her champagne glass. Half an hour later, Ethan was busy photographing guests when Clara approached again, eyes gleaming mischievously. "You know, Mr. Brooks," she began, "in PR, we call people like you a brand liability, an image risk." Ethan didn't even look up from his camera. "And in photography, we call people like you a natural lighting hazard. Too bright, tends to overexpose the lens." "Are you complimenting me?" "Not sure yet." From across the room, Madison watched, half amused, half nervous. Ethan wasn't fond of blunt people like Clara, and Clara had no patience for anyone who smiles like they're in a mint candy commercial. They were like two magnets of the same pole, one spark away from colliding. When the exhibition finally ended, Clara found Madison again. "The bride of the freedom-loving photographer, right? I was just teasing earlier. Don't take it personally." Madison smiled softly. "Clara, I've lived with Ethan for nearly 10 years in the same small town. Your jokes can't compete with him spilling paint on my dress back in middle school art class." Clara raised an eyebrow, then burst out laughing. "Good! At least he's got creative potential." But as she turned to leave, Madison caught something subtle in Clara's eyes, curiosity mixed with quiet caution. Clara wasn't malicious, but she was observant, especially when it came to people orbiting her cousin's life. Outside in the lobby, Ethan was packing his gear when Madison walked over. "You just survived round one with Sterling PR." "Survived?" he smirked. "I thought it was a job interview, and she was the panel." "Don't worry, she just talks fast, not sharp." Ethan gave a small, crooked smile. "I just worry that, after a few months working with Daniel, you'll start talking that fast." Madison blinked. "Are you jealous?" "I'm just afraid your world's speeding up, while I'm still living at the pace of slow shutter photos." The words hit her like a quiet ache. She took his hand, her voice softer. "You're where I stop to breathe, Ethan. Don't forget that." He smiled, but in his eyes flickered something unspoken, a shadow shaped like distance. Meanwhile, upstairs behind the glass wall that reflected the city lights, Clara Sterling stood beside Daniel, reviewing the sponsorship report. She took a sip of wine and tilted her head. "Your Madison Hayes is quite something, but her fiancé, the freelance photographer, he's interesting too." Daniel said nothing, only smiled faintly. Clara looked down into the lobby, where Madison laughed under the golden lights beside Ethan, and thought to herself, the world really is small. Small enough for two people who seem completely different to crash into each other. Hard. The New York night closed in slowly, but the quiet battle between the PR whirlwind and the romantic photographer had only just begun. Thursday at noon. The 52nd floor of Sterling Enterprises was as quiet as a library, the only sound the steady rhythm of typing, like the heartbeat of the building itself. Madison was hunched over her desk, eyes strained from wrestling with an unfinished report. The cold light from her monitor washed across her face, giving her that kind of focused, weary beauty only found in people too devoted to their work. The elevator doors slid open, letting in a warm, easy breeze, and with it, Ethan Brooks. He appeared in a pale blue shirt, holding two slightly frosted Starbucks cups. The sunlight pouring through the window touched his tousled hair, creating a contrast both strange and magnetic between the steel rigidity of corporate life and the effortless freedom of an artist. "Caramel macchiato, extra ice, for the girl who forgot to eat lunch?" His voice was light, teasing, but enough to make Madison's head snap up. She laughed, spinning her chair around, eyes lighting with a spark that Daniel, the man about to step out of his office, hadn't seen in anyone for a very long time. "You actually remembered?" "The last time I ordered that was months ago." Ethan shrugged. "A photographer's got a good visual memory. Besides, one look at your caffeine-deprived face and I knew." He set the cup on her desk and bent down to press a quick kiss to her forehead. "Don't skip lunch again, workaholic," he murmured, his voice playful but threaded with care. Right then, Daniel Sterling opened his office door. He stopped for half a second, just long enough for his eyes to catch the moment. Madison looking up, smiling, and Ethan leaning close, one hand resting casually on the back of her chair. "Mr. Sterling." Madison straightened immediately, a flicker of nervousness in her tone. Daniel nodded, calm and perfectly professional. "Afternoon." His gaze flicked briefly toward Ethan, briefly but longer than it needed to. Ethan extended a polite hand, smiling. "Ethan Brooks, Madison's fiancé." Daniel shook it, his grip firm, courteous, but with that subtle weight that made people feel assessed. "Daniel Sterling, nice to meet you." No extra words. A slight nod and he turned, walking back into his office. The glass door closed quietly, leaving the two of them standing outside. Madison exhaled, half amused, half embarrassed. "Perfect timing." Ethan raised a brow. "That's your boss? The one who accidentally played a stripper? Please don't bring that up ever again." Ethan laughed. "Just kidding. He seems cold. He's like that with everyone." "Let's hope not with you," Ethan said, still smiling. But there was something else behind it, something that didn't sound like a joke. After Ethan left, the faint scent of caramel coffee lingered around Madison's desk. She tried to focus on her emails again, but her mind drifted. She kept replaying the way Daniel had looked at them. That expression that wasn't angry, wasn't cold, just affected. By the end of the day, only a few people remained in the office. The overhead lights shifted to a softer gold, and beyond the glass, New York was slowly sinking into dusk. Madison was gathering her files when a soft knock sounded on the door. "Come in." Daniel stepped inside, jacket folded over one arm, tie loosened after a long day. He no longer looked like the powerful CEO of a billion-dollar company, just a tired man with quiet, unreadable eyes. "You planning to stay late again?" "Just finishing a few files. I'd rather not drown in deadlines tomorrow morning." He nodded, hesitating as if about to leave, but didn't. "He's a photographer, right?" Madison froze for a moment. "Yes, Ethan's freelance. Travel, exhibitions, magazines. Depends on the project." "Sounds interesting." "It is. He likes freedom, hates desk jobs." Daniel nodded again, eyes drifting to the city outside the window. His voice dropped a tone lower. "People like that are rare." Madison smiled softly. "He's also known me the longest. Since braces and purple diary days." Daniel chuckled quietly, a sound so small it felt more like proof he'd been listening than an actual laugh. "He's lucky." The words were light, almost careless, but in the stillness of the glass office, they struck deeper than he probably meant. When Daniel finally turned to leave, Madison found herself watching him and noticed something different. Not the usual chill in his posture, but a kind of tight silence, as if he were holding something back. And as he walked down the long corridor bathed in evening light, Daniel's mind was filled with just one image, her smile. The smile Madison gave that man, the one Daniel had never seen directed at himself. He let out a quiet, humorless laugh as he pressed the elevator button. She has a fiancé, a life, a promise, and him. He was just the man who once made her laugh, at the wrong time, in the wrong place. But as the elevator doors closed, Daniel felt it, a single, undeniable heartbeat that was not entirely his to control, a strange, unnamed pull. For the first time in a very long while, Daniel Sterling felt a surge of jealousy, and to him that was far more dangerous than. All of New York was drowned in the wintry gray of December. Snow fell lightly like ashes, covering the road leading to Riverside Memorial Chapel, where the funeral of Harold Sterling was being held, founder of Sterling Enterprises, and the man Daniel had spent his whole life trying to make proud. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive cologne. Everything was perfectly arranged, symmetrical flower stands, soft piano music, and condolences repeated so often they had lost their meaning. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "He must be proud of you, Daniel." Daniel nodded to each person, face calm, eyes hollow. His black suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, every detail precise, just like the way he lived. Only his hands, clasped together, faintly trembling, betrayed the control he tried to keep. In the back row, Madison sat quietly. She hadn't come to work. She came because she knew he wouldn't let anyone see him fall apart. When the crowd began to thin, Daniel stayed seated, motionless, alone. Madison rose and walked forward, the soft click of her heels echoing on the marble floor. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say anything. She simply sat beside him. The cold wind slipped through the chapel windows, lifting a few loose strands of hair from her shoulder. They stayed like that, without words, without glances. Just silence, and two people breathing through the same loss. That night, the hospital was nearly empty. The waiting room on the 7th floor glowed with sterile white light, so bright it made the space feel even colder. Daniel sat alone, tie loosened, jacket folded on the chair beside him. The coffee cup on the table had long gone cold. The air smelled faintly of bitterness. When Madison appeared, he didn't look surprised. Maybe some part of him had already known she would come. "You're still here?" she asked softly. "I don't know where else to go." His voice was hoarse, thin, the voice of someone who'd lost their compass. She sat across from him and handed over her wool sweater. "At least don't sit here freezing." He nodded faintly, hands tightening around the coffee cup. Silence stretched again, long, unhurried, heavy. Then he spoke, slow, as if each word scraped its way out. "I spent my whole life trying to make him proud, doing everything right, and now he's gone. I don't even know who I'm doing it for anymore." Madison watched him quietly. Under the dim hospital light, he wasn't the commanding CEO everyone feared. He was just a son trying to hold on to the shadow of the father he'd lost. Her voice came out soft, fragile, but steady. "Maybe it's time you start living for yourself, Daniel." He looked up. Their eyes met, tired, grief-stricken, but painfully real. Daniel gave a small, broken smile. "I'm not even sure who I am without him." "Then start finding out," she said gently. "Not today, not all at once. Just don't be afraid." Silence again. Only the faint whistle of wind against the window. Madison reached out, placing her hand lightly over his, not to comfort, but to promise. Daniel looked down at that hand, then slowly turned his palm to hold it. For the first time, he allowed himself to be weak in front of someone. No words, no boundaries, only warmth, shared between two hands in a cold room. The moment stretched like a silent note. To anyone passing by, they might have looked perfectly still. But in their eyes, something had shifted, a closeness that was no longer just sympathy. Daniel exhaled, long and quiet. "Thank you for not saying, 'I'm sorry.' I've heard that all day. It made me feel like a headline, not a person." Madison smiled faintly. "I know. Because if I lost someone, I wouldn't want people saying it either." He looked at her then, really looked, and his gaze lingered a heartbeat too long. Just enough for both to know something new had taken root. The sterile light washed over their faces. Two lost souls finding each other in a moment that didn't need words. When Madison stood to leave, he stayed seated, eyes following her. "You should get some rest," she said softly. "I'll try." She nodded, turning toward the door. Behind her, Daniel glanced at the sweater she'd left on the chair, the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to it, warm and real. For the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. Outside, snow continued to fall, but it didn't feel as cold anymore. Somewhere in that quiet night, something had shifted. Subtle, wordless, but strong enough to tilt the axis of two hearts. Early spring. Central Park was brushed in the soft green of newborn leaves. Joggers scattered along the brick paths, their breath misting in the crisp air. Madison sat on a wooden bench near the lake, her beige trench coat loosely fastened, a cup of coffee cooling between her hands. Beside her sat Ethan, denim jacket, old camera in hand, the same one he always called the witness of my youth. There was no awkward silence between them, only that kind of stillness people need when they've lost their way for too long. Ethan turned the camera lens slowly, eyes fixed on the water. "You know," he began, voice light as the wind, "I think I'm slowly losing you." Madison didn't answer. She watched a flock of ducks glide across the surface, her chest tightening with that strange mixture of gratitude and guilt. "I'm not angry," Ethan continued, "just sad. For 10 years, I got used to having you in every frame of my life. As a smile, a reflection, sometimes just a shadow in the background. But lately, he paused, then gave a faint, crooked smile. Lately, the light in my photos feels dimmer. Madison turned to him. His hair was slightly messy in the sunlight, his brown eyes still gentle. But there was uncertainty there now, a tremor where confidence used to be. Ethan, she whispered, I'm not trying to change. I know. His tone was calm, almost too calm. People don't try to change when they're growing. They just start walking in the direction they're meant to go. A breeze swept through, tangling her hair. He reached out instinctively to tuck a strand behind her ear, a gesture so familiar that both froze mid-motion. You're different, Madison, he said quietly. You're living at a speed I can't keep up with. Your life's full of meetings, deadlines, things that make you glow in ways I don't recognize anymore. And I'm still behind the camera, capturing everything, even as the person in the frame walks away. The words landed softly, but they hurt. Madison took a breath. You talk like it's over. He shook his head. No, I'm talking like I understand. You're happy, aren't you? She couldn't say yes, couldn't say no. Ethan smiled, weakly, beautifully, the same smile that had made her fall for him in 8th grade, in a classroom full of sunlight and laughter. I guess if you're happy, he said, I'll just have to learn how to photograph that moment, without stepping into the frame. Madison's eyes stung. You don't have to step out, Ethan. Maybe I do, he replied softly, so the picture stays beautiful, even if I'm no longer in it. They sat a while longer, wordless. Memories drifted through. The road trips, the outdoor movie nights, the silly fights that always ended in laughter. No one had betrayed anyone. It was just that sometimes, when love lasts too long, people forget how to keep moving together. Ethan was the first to stand. His voice was hoarse but carried that same teasing tone she'd always loved. So if anyone asks, tell them your CEO stole your fiancé. Madison laughed through her tears. Stole? He doesn't even know he's in a story yet. Ethan shrugged. At least he's got 10 more floors of office space than I do, and a heart that skips to the wrong rhythm. She laughed again, hand over her mouth, the sound breaking halfway into a sob. Ethan bent down and kissed her forehead. A kiss of friendship, of farewell, of a chapter closing without needing promises. You'll be okay? He asked. I think so. You. I've got my camera, the road, the light, and you, somewhere in my old photos. They looked at each other one last time. No tears, no pulling back. Just two people who had once been each other's whole world, learning to love by letting go. By dusk, Madison walked along the path out of the park. The wind carried the scent of grass and roasted coffee from a nearby cafe. Her phone buzzed. An email from Sterling Enterprises. Meeting moved to 9 a.m. The CEO requests your presence. She looked at the screen and smiled faintly. A chapter had closed, and the world opened again, where love was no longer a habit, but a choice. At night, Sterling Enterprises looked like a different world. The glass walls no longer reflected power, but carried the dim, golden glow of a tired city. On the 52nd floor, where the day had been filled with emails, deadlines, and endless meetings, only one person remained. Madison stood beside her darkened desk, trench coat over her shoulders, a cup of cold coffee in hand. She was about to leave when she noticed that Daniel's office light was still on. Strange. It was already 10 p.m. She knocked softly. Inside, Daniel sat quietly, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. On his desk rested an old photograph, Harold Sterling in his younger days, eyes just as resolute as his son's. He looked up at the sound. You're still here? I was about to ask you the same thing. Madison stepped in with a faint smile. We're the last two people on this floor. Doesn't anyone ever check if you're overworking yourself? Daniel smiled slightly. I'm used to having an assistant who reminds me to rest. Former assistant, she corrected. I'm the operations manager now. The air shifted. He didn't reply, just looked at her, and that look made her heart skip. In the soft light and city glow filtering through the glass, He no longer looked like a cold CEO, but a man quietly wrestling with himself. I heard about, he began, voice low. You and Ethan. Madison nodded. We broke up. Still friends, but sometimes two people growing up together don't mean they'll walk the same road forever. Daniel leaned back against his desk, gaze deepening. I didn't know if I should say this, but when I heard that, I... He paused, pressed his lips together, and exhaled. I felt relieved. And that scared me, because no one should feel happy when someone else's relationship ends. Madison smiled softly, stepping closer. What are you confessing, Mr. Sterling? The light fell diagonally across his face. That I like you. Not in some impulsive or grateful way. I just do. For the first time in years, someone makes me want to live differently, to laugh more, to feel human again instead of just being a CEO. He lowered his gaze, voice rough as if admitting a sin. But I'm afraid of rumors, of people saying you're only here because of me. Madison was quiet for a beat. Then she laughed lightly, clear, freeing. You once pretended to be a stripper in a midtown club. I think we're past the point of fearing rumors. Daniel laughed, a deep, genuine, warm sound. He took a step closer. She didn't move away. Their eyes met, slow and steady. I don't want to hide anymore, Daniel whispered. Not in the company. Not from myself. So what do you plan to do? Start over tonight. He held out his hand, not touching hers yet, but close enough that she could feel the warmth between them. Madison placed her hand over his. His was cold, hers warm. They stood there, listening to the city breathe beyond the glass. We're going to make things complicated, she murmured. I know. There'll be gossip, scrutiny. I know that too. And you still want this? Daniel leaned closer, voice low and honest. More than anything. Madison smiled, eyes shining. Then I guess the contract's signed. He chuckled softly, bent down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Not rushed, not hesitant, but a quiet affirmation. We begin here, right where everything once felt wrong. A few days later, when they officially announced their relationship, the entire company buzzed like a storm. Clara Sterling, the outspoken, sharp-tongued blonde in red heels, was the loudest critic. Cousin, you're walking straight into an office scandal, she exclaimed, arms crossed in the PR department. Daniel only shrugged. If I have to choose between a scandal and the person I love, I know which one to pick. Madison stood beside him, half amused, watching their verbal sparring. She didn't know what the future would bring. Only that, for the first time in years, she felt alive. Not just working, not just striving, living. Later that evening, as Clara stormed out of the building, heels clicking furiously, she accidentally bumped into Ethan Brooks, who was covering the company's new marketing campaign. A flash went off. She scowled. Hey, what the hell are you shooting? Ethan raised an eyebrow, his tone slow and teasing. A fateful moment. Trust me, the lighting's perfect. She narrowed her eyes. You really are a freelance photographer? Because your face screams too much freedom. He laughed. Sounds like a coffee invitation. In your dreams. Then I hope I sleep early tonight, he said, snapping one more shot, capturing Clara's half-hidden smile just before she realized it existed. Saturday morning. Sunlight spilled through the glass windows of Sterling's studio, where the crew was preparing for the new campaign. Reimagine Sterling. The space buzzed with a mix of indie music, the hiss of a coffee machine, and the gleam of light bouncing off polished concrete floors. Ethan Brooks, denim shirt rolled to his elbows, a fine tattoo tracing the inside of his wrist, was crouched by the tripod, adjusting the lens. The camera hung from his neck like an extension of his heartbeat. His dark brown eyes carried a focus that bordered on memory. From the entrance, Clara Sterling appeared, the kind of woman who could bring order to chaos with a single glance. Pencil skirt, puff-sleeve white blouse, hair tied in a sleek high ponytail, red heels clicking against the floor. She cast him a look sharp enough to slice glass. You still haven't fixed the lighting? We're 2 hours behind schedule. Ethan didn't look up. Good light doesn't follow schedules. But clients do, he smirked. Queen of press releases strikes again. Hipster with a camera, she shot back. Save the art lecture. The crew exchanged cautious smiles, trying not to laugh. The air crackled between them. Not hostile exactly, but alive. The kind of tension that carried its own strange rhythm. When the shoot was nearly over, Clara climbed a stepladder to fix a crooked banner. Careful, Ethan said without looking up. I've worn heels my entire life, thank you very much, she replied, proud and dismissive. A split second later, the ladder wobbled. Her balance faltered. Ethan moved before he could think, arms catching her just as she stumbled. The banner crashed down, paper scattering like snow. Clara blinked, realizing she was in his arms. The studio light fell at an angle, outlining his face. Too close, too warm, his breath carrying a faint scent of coffee and summer rain. You! She gasped, steadying herself. Ethan's grin was low and rough. Just in the right place, at the right time. Like every good mistake. She pushed him away, cheeks flushed. Don't flatter yourself. I almost fell because of my heels, not because of you. He chuckled. Another 2 inches and the headline would have read, PR Queen murdered by her own stilettos. She glared, but her lips twitched. Around them, the crew relaxed, laughter filling the air. Yet beneath it, something had shifted, an undercurrent neither could name, the beginning of a chemistry that demanded attention. Later that afternoon, Ethan sat alone in the quiet studio, scrolling through the shots. Among hundreds of images, one held him still. Clara turning her head mid-motion, light catching the defiant sparkle in her eyes, lips slightly parted as if about to deliver another sharp remark. He zoomed in, smiling to himself. Madison never made me look this long. Madison, his friend, his first love, the person who once understood him down to every breath. Their breakup had been quiet, no tears, no anger, just understanding. Looking back now, he saw it clearly. With Madison, he had loved the comfort of familiarity, the nostalgia of shared years, not the woman she had become. And she, in turn, had held on to him as a piece of warmth, not as the man who still made her pulse race. What they once called love had been a gentle confusion between habit and home. But when he saw Clara through his lens, brilliant, infuriating, alive, he felt his heart beat to a rhythm that wasn't calm or safe. It was awake. Across town, Madison was laughing. In Daniel's kitchen, she stood beside him, hair loosely tied, wearing his shirt over a thin slip dress. He was stirring pasta, his admitted one recipe mastered only by reading the back of the box. You're not measuring the salt? She asked, amused. I measure with emotion, he said, smiling, swirling the spoon in the pot. She laughed. First time I've seen a CEO replace data with feelings. He shrugged. You happened. You broke all my formulas. She looked up at him, the sunlight from the window softening the lines of his face. Gentle, sincere, grounding. Her heart stuttered. With Ethan, she'd known the calm of youth. With Daniel, she felt the pull of something deeper, a love that didn't ask her to hide or pretend. Daniel leaned down, brushing his nose against hers. You know, since you came into my life, I can't even remember what my last deadline was. She smiled, eyes bright. And since I met you, I forgot what according to plan means. They laughed together, surrounded by the scent of butter, garlic, and soft golden light. That night, Ethan sent Madison a photo, the portrait of Clara. His message was simple. Thought you'd like this light. It's the kind you always said made everything look alive. Madison looked at the screen and smiled. She makes you happy? She typed. He replied a few minutes later. Not happy like you. Not peaceful, but the kind that makes me want to take one more shot. She smiled again, quietly. Both of them knew. They had been right to let each other go. Their first love hadn't ended in heartbreak, but in understanding. Some people are meant to walk beside you for a chapter, not a lifetime. Back at the studio, Ethan picked up his camera again. Clara was arguing with the lighting tech, something about the backdrop being too warm. When she turned and caught him grinning, her eyes narrowed immediately. What's so funny? Nothing. Just, the light's perfect today. Then use it, hipster. Yes, ma'am. Whatever you say, Queen. Click. The shutter snapped. In that instant, Clara Sterling had no idea she'd just stepped into the frame of a new story. One that began not with vows or promises, but with friction, laughter, and a smile that neither of them quite understood yet. 6 months passed, swift as time, yet slow as a film reel replayed in gentle motion. Early winter in New York shimmered under city lights, reflections dancing on rain puddles like thousands of trembling diamonds in the cold wind. Madison thought tonight was just a small company celebration. Daniel had only told her to dress nicely. She obeyed, wearing a simple black dress and a long knit coat, and when the car stopped, she looked up and burst out laughing. Club Velvet, the velvet purple door, the neon sign glows softly, the very place where everything between them had accidentally begun. Are you kidding me? She turned to Daniel. He smiled, stepping out to open her door. I thought it was time to fix a very poor performance. Inside, the chaos of pounding bass and smoky air was gone. The club had been transformed. Soft purple lighting, white tablecloths, round tables circling a small stage. A jazz band played, Can't Help Falling in Love in the corner. Madison followed him to the front table, half smiling, half suspicious. You're not about to do something weird, are you? I promise, Daniel said with mock seriousness. No laws of dance will be broken this time. She took a sip of champagne. If you're reenacting that night, you'd better have rehearsed. I did. The music faded. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight lit the stage. And from behind the velvet curtain, Daniel Sterling stepped out. Black suit, white shirt buttoned, tie slightly loose. He looked like he'd walked out of a magazine, except for one thing. The shoes, dancing shoes. Laughter rippled through the room as the music shifted to a swing rhythm. Daniel began to move, clumsy at first, but with rhythm, effort, and something rare. Soul. He spun, stumbled, recovered, and bowed to the audience with an embarrassed grin. Madison buried her face in her hands, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Oh my God, you actually practiced? 3 weeks, he said mid-spin, and I only almost fell 8 times today. She clapped, tears of laughter in her eyes. When the song melted into Perfect by Ed Sheeran, Daniel walked toward her, extending a hand. You're not going to let me dance alone, are you? She rose, slipping her hand into his. The lights softened. The music slowed. They stood beneath the same spotlight where, half a year ago, she had mistaken him for a stripper. Daniel looked into her eyes, his voice warm and steady. I've been dancing wrong my whole life, Madison. But there was one step I got right. She smiled through a tear. Which one? The one that led me to you. Applause thundered through the room. Madison covered her mouth, laughing and crying all at once. Daniel dropped to one knee, pulling out a small, glimmering ring. Help me fix my last mistake, he said softly, by saying yes. She nodded before words could form, laughing through tears as the crowd erupted around them. At the back of the room, Ethan Brooks leaned against the wall, murmuring under his breath. If my cousin danced like that back in high school, he wouldn't have survived the first round of prom night. Beside him, Clara Sterling, hair tousled, trench coat draped over one arm, heels dangling from her hand, shot him a glare. If you laugh out loud, I'm uploading the clip to the company server. Ethan smirked. Relax. Next time I'll dance worse just to make you laugh. If you start dancing, I'm leaving. Then I guess that means you've already agreed to come to my performance. Clara rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth betrayed a small smile. On stage, Daniel slipped the ring onto Madison's finger. She threw her arms around him as cheers filled the club. The purple lights turned to soft gold, confetti fluttering down like warm rain. Amid the music, Daniel whispered into her ear, You know, I've spent a significant portion of my life trying to get things right, but maybe the best things I've ever had all started with mistakes. Madison laughed through her tears. Then maybe I don't want you to fix them anymore. They kissed. Below them, Ethan raised his camera and clicked, the flash freezing a moment that captured 2 things he once thought could never coexist: love and being right. Beside him, Clara watched quietly, her sharp gaze softened by something unfamiliar. Are you going to photograph every proposal you see? She asked. Ethan lowered the camera, smiling faintly. Only the ones that start with mistakes. And what if the mistake is me? He met her eyes and held them. Then I won't fix it. She laughed, looking away, but something inside her stirred, small and real. On stage, Daniel and Madison spun under the golden light, surrounded by jazz, laughter, and applause. Two people who had once lost their way had found each other again, while two others, somewhere in the crowd below, had just taken their first step into another dance of fate. 1 year later, the garden of the Sterling Foundation bloomed in the full blush of spring. Sunlight filtered through the trees, scattering gold over rows of white chairs and a lavender-lined aisle. The air smelled of fresh grass, wedding cake, and happiness. At the center of it all, Madison Hayes walked slowly down the path in a soft satin gown, her hair half-tied, eyes glistening. Waiting at the altar was Daniel Sterling, black tuxedo sharp, hands in pockets, expression calm, yet betrayed by the quick beat of his heart. As she reached him, he took her hand and whispered just for her, "You know, I used to think my life was built on plans. Turns out, the best thing that ever happened started with chaos." Madison smiled, sunlight dancing in her eyes. "I thought the same. If that night hadn't gone wrong, I'd probably still be hiding at the bar." Laughter rippled through the crowd as music swelled. Friends, colleagues, and familiar faces from Sterling Enterprises stood and clapped when the officiant finally declared them husband and wife. At the back of the garden, Clara Sterling and Ethan Brooks were working. Clara, headphones on, clipboard in hand, directed the crew like a general on a battlefield. "Make sure the shot's bright enough. Full frame on the bride. Don't crop the dress." Ethan smirked. "Yes, ma'am." Queen of Press Releases reporting for duty. She shot him a look. "And don't think I forgot about that time you caught me sneezing mid-shoot." "That was your most natural photo ever," he said, raising the camera. "Pure emotion." "Pure murder, you mean," she muttered, turning away, but her lips betrayed a smile. Then as Madison and Daniel exchanged rings, Ethan froze. The camera lowered, but his gaze stayed fixed. Not on the ceremony, but on Clara, bending to adjust a microphone wire, a few golden strands of hair falling across her cheek. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward and kissed her. Just a few seconds, but enough for the entire crew to gasp in shock. Clara stood frozen, face flushed, torn between outrage, disbelief, and laughter she couldn't hold back. You just ruined the entire focus." Ethan grinned. "Maybe, but I finally focused on the right thing." Laughter erupted across the garden. Madison and Daniel turned at the commotion. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "I guess my cousin finally met someone who can keep her quiet for 5 seconds. Madison tilted her head, smiling. "Looks like fate enjoys recycling mistakes into miracles." The evening reception shimmered in golden light. Daniel and Madison danced under strings of warm bulbs, hands entwined, eyes locked. The walls of the office, the weight of responsibility, all gone. Only two people remained, once lost in separate worlds, now perfectly found. Across the garden, on the stone steps behind the lights, Ethan and Clara sat side by side, laughing as they scrolled through the day's photos. "You're the worst photographer," Clara teased softly. "Maybe," Ethan murmured, leaning closer, "but I just captured the best moment of my life." She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. From afar, the music floated through the night. "Can't Help Falling in Love," the very song Daniel had once fumbled to learn. Two couples, two stories that began with misunderstandings, wrong turns, and misplaced timing, and now both framed in the same sunset hue beneath the lavender sky of New York. Sometimes destiny doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to bring the right people together at the wrong moment for everything